You're listening to West Virginia Week, a regular podcast from West Virginia Public Broadcasting that looks back at the major stories of the week. I'm your host this week, Bill Lynch. On this West Virginia Week, plans for a new transmission line might be in trouble, a former state delegate is indicted, and West Virginia has a new Secretary of Tourism. Let's jump right in with a few short news stories. The application to construct a transmission line in northeastern West Virginia is likely to be delayed. Chris Schulz has more.
West Virginia Public Service Commission staff reviewing the application for the Mid-Atlantic Resiliency Link recommended Wednesday the application be delayed by at least 60 days or dismissed entirely pending a federal order. Developer NextEra Energy applied January 30th to construct a new 107-mile-long transmission line from Pennsylvania through West Virginia to Virginia. The commission set regulatory hearing dates for late October and early November, with deadline to file direct testimony September 8th. The staff report says they and affected landowners need time to properly review proposed route changes submitted by NextEra Energy on July 30th. Staff also said they cannot properly vet the application until a review of the rules that govern how large energy users connect to the electric grid that was ordered in June by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is resolved. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Chris Schulz in Morgantown.
Unemployment fell in July compared to the previous month, but so did the state's workforce participation rate. Eric Douglas reports.
West Virginia's seasonally adjusted unemployment rate was 4.1% in July. The total number of employed state residents decreased by 100, while the number of unemployed state residents dropped by 800. Year over year, the state's total non-farm payroll increased by 1,400 jobs, with the largest gain occurring in private education and health services, with 3,200 more jobs. Total government employment lost 1,000 positions, with 2,100 fewer federal jobs, 1,000 fewer local government jobs, and 2,100 more state jobs. West Virginia's seasonally adjusted labor force participation rate also dropped by a tenth to the nation's lowest at 53.8% in July. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, this is Eric Douglas in Charleston.
A federal grand jury has indicted a former state delegate on charges of sexual exploitation of a child. Chris Schulz has more.
United States Attorney Moore Capito announced Wednesday that former teacher David Elliott Pritt was indicted on 3 felony counts. The charges are sexual exploitation of a child, coercion and enticement of a child, and tampering with a witness, victim, or informant. Pritt was initially arrested last month after a criminal complaint accused him of coercing and sexually assaulting an underage female student. An indictment is merely an allegation, and all defendants are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. Pritt is scheduled to appear in court for an initial appearance, arraignment, and detention hearing on Monday, August 24th. As students return to school, Capito reiterated this is an opportunity for parents and caregivers to talk to their kids about safely reporting and talking about any situation that potentially involves grooming, inappropriate behavior, or abuse. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Chris Schulz in Morgantown.
West Virginia has a new Secretary of Tourism. Eric Douglas has the details.
Kayla Kessinger, a former West Virginia delegate from 2015 to 2022, has been appointed to be the new Secretary of Tourism by Governor Patrick Morrisey. Morrisey said he wants the tourism department to increase tourism, but to also make sure the state encourages more people to move in and tell the economic development story. Kessinger gave credit to the existing tourism team.
I think that in a lot of ways, they have put West Virginia on the map. Not by pretending that we're something that we're not, but by really showing people who we are and who we've always been.
Morrisey noted Kessinger has worked to build coalitions about issues West Virginians care about. She is currently the state program director for Her Plan, a pro-life organization. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, this is Eric Douglas in Charleston.
A statewide group alleges that West Virginia has failed in its duty to provide an adequate education to some students, and they plan to sue. Chris Schulz has more.
As required by state law, the American Civil Liberties Union of West Virginia notified state officials Monday that they intend to file suit on behalf of a class of Lincoln County students in 30 days. They allege the state's persistent underfunding of public schools violates the thorough and efficient education guarantee as well as the equal protection provisions of the West Virginia Constitution. Nearly 50 years ago, another series of lawsuits from Lincoln County led to the state's school system being deemed unconstitutionally inadequate by the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals. In their notice, the ACLU says students in Lincoln County receive a worse education than their parents and grandparents did, and that by some measures, the schools are worse off than the system a court already found unconstitutional. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Chris Schulz in Morgantown.
Governor Patrick Morrisey announced Wednesday that communities struggling to provide clean drinking water to their residents will get financial and practical help. Here's Maria Young.
As a result of his four-county two-day water listening tour earlier this month, grants and low-interest loans totaling $145 million will be used for water and wastewater infrastructure projects in the coming year, Morrissey said. The state is partnering with Marshall University, West Virginia University, and 11 regional planning and development councils to help understaffed water systems. The process will be public and easy to track, Morrissey said.
And we have to hold people accountable to make sure we get the projects done, right? That means creating a new public dashboard showing where the water funding applications are and where the projects stand.
Morrissey said his administration will work with lawmakers in the coming regular session to modernize utility laws and cut outdated paperwork. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Maria Young in Charleston.
A chemical recycling operation in Kanawha Valley is raising more than pollution concerns from observers. Chris Schulz reports.
Clean Seas West Virginia received last week a construction permit from the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection for a plastics recycling facility. Tom Torres is chief of staff at the Ohio River Valley Institute, a nonprofit Appalachian think tank. With more than $15 million in state loans for the facility, Torres says the publicly available sources on the company's finances raise questions about their ability to develop, maintain, and expand the facility in Bell.
Has it secured the financing needed to develop the facility? Is it on track to meet the employment requirements tied to their $1.75 million loan from the state? And when the facility will actually come online, which has been a bit of a moving target.
Torres says overall, the industry of chemically recycling plastics has encountered challenges getting off the ground or maintaining operations. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Chris Schulz in Morgantown.
A multi-state outbreak of salmonella linked to jalapeno peppers has been expanded to include West Virginia. Maria Young has more.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is investigating salmonella infections now in 32 states, including West Virginia. There have been 431 cases nationwide, 2 recorded in this state. Salmonella is a bacteria-based intestinal illness that causes diarrhea, stomach cramps, fever, nausea, and vomiting up to 6 days after exposure to infected animals or contaminated foods. In West Virginia, it's been linked to jalapeno peppers distributed by Taylor Fresh Foods and used in food products including guacamole, sandwiches, salsas, and wraps. The CDC advises not eating recalled peppers or products made with them, washing surfaces and sanitizing items that may have come in contact with the peppers. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Maria Young in Charleston.
You're listening to West Virginia Week, and now some of our top feature stories from the past week. For the third installment of our series on data centers, we look at how data centers proposals are provoking outrage from local opponents. With the third installment of our series on data centers, we look at how data center proposals are provoking outrage from local opponents. For the Appalachian Mid-South Newsroom, Kentucky Public Radio's Joe Sonka reports that such fights are increasingly common and bipartisan.
The City Council in tiny Bergen, Kentucky held a special meeting in early July where residents could not contain their anger. The council was advancing an ordinance to annex more than 1,000 acres of unincorporated Mercer County farmland, which would double its size. The reason? That's where a developer wants to build a massive hyperscale data center where it would be unencumbered by any city or county zoning rules. The council voted 3-2 to give the annexation its first reading over the objections of residents who were not allowed to speak.
A motion to adjourn, is there a second?
Similar scenes have played out all over Kentucky since last year with increasing frequency. Kentucky passed a new law to give massive state tax breaks to lure the development of data centers, which are the engine of artificial intelligence services pushed by tech company giants. Some welcome data center projects and their promises of major tax revenue for schools and local governments, but it's more commonly met with outright revolt over fears over water and air pollution, noise, or increased electric utility bills. Louisville Mayor Craig Greenberg is one of dozens of local officials across the state dealing with opposition to proposed data centers. Meanwhile, more than a dozen local governments have passed moratoriums over the past year. That includes big cities like Louisville and small rural communities like Mercer County.
Please do not let the greed of a few outweigh the well-being of our people. Please stop this now. You have the
Roughly 200 opponents showed up in Harrodsburg for a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting in late July. Mercer County is conservative and heavily Republican, but Steve Marshall, a data center opponent from Salvisa, says their coalition has all kinds.
I'm a conservative. This group is made up of, you name it, liberals, conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, libertarians. That should say a lot. That's rare.
That point was highlighted by Dallas Waterfield of Bergen. He mentioned Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez recently holding up jars of dirty water from a well near a Meta data center in Georgia in a congressional hearing.
Even on the news, that AOC, that Cortez woman, she's against it. She had dirty water in a glass on the national news.
Waterfield says he thinks Ocasio-Cortez is a communist and disagrees with her on almost everything, but not this. On the polar opposite side of the data center issue is President Donald Trump, who won Mercer County with 74% of the vote in 2024.
You have communities that really want the data centers. And frankly, those are the smart communities.
Last week, data center opponents got a win as the Mercer County government passed a one-year moratorium on data centers. The problem? That would not apply to Bergen. After a packed council meeting where more than a dozen Bergen residents spoke in opposition, a vote was delayed on annexation. Interim Mayor Joe Monroe says the developer would have to make its case in order to win support. He says the data center fight has gotten ugly over the summer with threats lodged at public officials.
This fussing and fighting. If this keeps up, we're going to have to take that sign down at the city limits that says this is a friendly little city. Because right now it ain't no friendly little city.
Patatoni, the company behind the data center and annexation plan, did not agree to an interview request about the project. I'm Joe Sonka in Bergen.
It's thunderstorm season, but not all of them are the same. For the Appalachian Mid-South newsroom, Bill Burton and meteorologist Tawana Andrew break down what we know and what we don't about the climate and weather in the region. This week, they examine different types of thunderstorms.
Today's topic is all about thunderstorms.
It is that magical time of the year where those things can pop up seemingly out of nowhere, and there's different kinds of thunderstorms too. That's what you're going to take us through today?
Yeah, so we'll talk about the different types of thunderstorms, which can be classified based on whether there's rotation, whether there's updrafts or downdrafts close or far away from each other, or even just the appearance of the thunderstorm itself. So the most basic type of thunderstorm is a single cell storm. This forms when you have very weak wind shear, so there's not a lot of strong wind moving around in the atmosphere, and you have rising air that creates that thunderstorm and allows for precipitation to develop within the cloud until that precipitation becomes too heavy for the updraft, causing it to fall. And in that type of situation, you usually have light winds and not a lot of atmospheric energy, which allows the precipitation to fall within or near the updraft, and that weakens the storm. So a single cell storm typically lasts about 30 to 45 minutes. It can produce some small hail and it can produce some gusty winds, but those winds will remain below severe limits, which is 58 miles per hour.
Okay, so it can come and go quickly, but still do some damage occasionally.
Exactly. So kind of like what we see during the summer months where they just pop in the afternoon and then fall apart not too long after.
Okay.
But some of those stronger summer storms are pulse thunderstorms, which is a type of single cell storm. So it's not usually severe, but it will form when you have a little bit more atmospheric energy available. So on those more hot, humid days. And with that extra energy in place, that actually allows for more intense and greater amounts of precipitation. So these storms can produce strong winds, usually reaching speeds of less than 70 miles per hour. So that will put it on the low end of a severe thunderstorm warning. They can also produce small to moderate sized hail. So this is the one where you'll get like the pea-sized, the nickel-sized hail in the summer months. And in some cases, you'll even get a weak tornado, EF0, EF1, out of a pulse thunderstorm like this.
Okay.
And then the most common type of thunderstorm is a multicellular cluster of storms. So basically, just think of all the thunderstorms gathering around together and hanging out. That's basically that's basically what that is.
I think
And
that's a new Marvel movie, isn't it?
it's like the Avengers with thunderstorms. Yes,
Exactly.
basically that. Yeah. So these clusters consist of multiple storms that are in different stages of their life cycles, and they can persist for hours, and they kind of just move together as one unit. So like the Avengers, but in their lemming form, I guess. So these types of storms can last for several hours, yes, especially when you have consistent rising air leading to new updrafts, so basically creating more energy for additional storms to form. And that rising air can be caused by factors like warm fronts, cold fronts, outflows from other storms, or even elevated terrain nearby. All can lead to that rising air.
So it's not asking, is there a thunderstorm coming? It's what kind of thunderstorm is coming? And we know these different kinds of thunderstorms now because of this edition of Science Behind the Forecast with Wave 3 meteorologist Tawana Andrew. Thanks for the knowledge, Tawana.
Of course.
Those last two stories were produced as part of the Appalachian Mid-South Newsroom, a collaboration between NPR and several public radio stations in West Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Visit the special series page under the News tab on our website to find a link to the story and more. Wildlife advocates are pushing to bring animals like elk back to the eastern part of the country. A new book, The Beasts of the East, The Fall and Rise of America's Eastern Wilderness, looks at the process. Inside Appalachia's Mason Adams spoke with the author Andrew Moore. Moore began by reading from his book.
In the East Kentucky of Doug Hensley's childhood, there were squirrels, but not much else. In the 1950s, the image of wildlife had been reduced to that of a bushy-tailed rodent bounding up the shag of a second-growth hickory tree. And even that was rare. The deepest woods might have harbored chipmunks and wood rats, but the deepest woods were nearly gone. Even at night, raccoon and possum remained scarce. In terms of wild game, families had scant left for the pot, except for an occasional rabbit and a few species of rodent. Over the course of just a few generations, the mammalian chorus of eastern beasts had been whittled down to little more than whistle pigs and chirping squirrels.
That's stark. That's stark. Why did you choose that particular passage other than it's short?
It's short. I think it also is important to remember just how thoroughly we'd removed animals from the landscape. The animals that I feature in my book, the elk of central Appalachia, the bison of Midwestern prairies, and the red wolf of the Southeast, were found throughout the East. And until we killed them all for various reasons. For the big meaty animals, we killed them for their meat and hide, and the predators, we killed them because we couldn't imagine sharing the land with them. But over the late 20th century, really, we've been trying to put the pieces back together. We've been trying to restore biodiversity. We've been trying to restore game animals. And then the trickiest thing of all has been trying to restore large predators. And the idea for this book really came about when I learned that the state of West Virginia was going to be reintroducing elk to its southern coalfield counties. And it was shocking to me because I couldn't picture these big Western animals in the hills and hollers of southern West Virginia, this densely forested part of the world. I realized that it was my own lack of understanding of the ancient East and this wilder time of the Eastern United States, that of course elk were found in West Virginia, Kentucky, all throughout Appalachia and the Southeast. I was captivated by this idea of trying to bring these animals back. I thought it was a hopeful story at a time when, we're surrounded by climate disaster and no shortage of bad news related to the environment. I was attracted to these stories of bringing wildness back to the East and by focusing on these large, charismatic animals.
Yeah, a lot of the early part of the book really focuses on elk, which have been reintroduced in multiple states across Appalachia. But your book focuses mostly on Kentucky, where the process started earliest in the late 90s. So how's it going there so far?
From the perspective of elk on the ground, it's going really well. I focused on Kentucky because what started there in the late 90s was kind of a revolution of stalking elk in the East. There were a couple states that had done it earlier in the 20th century, like Pennsylvania and Michigan. But what they were trying to do in Kentucky was unlike anything they'd done before. They were moving not just a few animals and kind of putting them out and seeing how it went. The plan in Kentucky was really bold. And they started with 1,500 animals over the course of 5 years into eastern Kentucky. That's a lot of large animals. It's kind of thought that maybe this is the largest movement of large animals at any point in history, the largest intentional movement and translocation of large animals. The reason why Kentucky was so different from, say, Pennsylvania or Michigan is that the folks who were driving this process had something at their disposal that these other places hadn't had. And what they had was vast amounts of reclaimed mountaintop removal coal mine sites.
That was author Andrew Moore speaking with Mason Adams about The Beasts of the East, the Fall and Rise of America's Eastern Wilderness. To hear the rest of that interview and more, listen to Inside Appalachia Sunday mornings at 7 and Sunday evenings at 6 on West Virginia Public Broadcasting. That's it for West Virginia Week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here next week. As always, you can see these stories and more at wvpublic.org. I'm Bill Lynch.